Today we have another young Indian with us in the Voice of the Young series. Hello everyone, good to be with you once again. Today we have with us Hamza Syed. He is doing his PhD in the UK. Over to you, Hamza.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me here as one of the voices of the young. And it's really an honor to be here. I've seen some of the videos and I hope I'll be able to contribute to this series and hopefully share something which would be inspiring and from which, people can learn. So in terms of my journey here, it has been, a long but interesting one. I think I've taken a lot of different detours, but in some ways, it was all leading towards this PhD and hopefully leading towards something meaningful beyond this as well. So till my class 12th, I'd studied science. And I come from this tiny village in Uttar Pradesh, very close to the India-Nepal border. Did part of my schooling from Lucknow because the schools we had there beyond class 8 weren't really any good. So I had to move to Lucknow. I stayed with my aunt for a couple of years and then stayed on my own with some friends. But it was all science, and as is a characteristic of that region, that people expect you to go ahead and do an engineering, maybe go for civil services and so on. And that was kind of what was expected from me as well, especially after I did well during my board exams. So everyone had that for me, that I would go on to these IITs and then maybe IIMs and then maybe go the civil services routes. But I kind of figured out more than what I wanted to do. I figured out what I didn't want to do. And that was that I didn't want to do engineering. But I was really interested in physics because physics was something that seemed very logical to me. Everything made sense. And, there were, if you conduct an experiment, the results would turn out a certain way if things, if you've accounted for things. So that was really appealing to me. So I asked around about the options that I could take after my class 12th, and ended up at Delhi University and applied to a few courses. So physics was one of them. Then I also liked English. I had no idea about economics, but talking to some of my friends who had taken it, they were fond of it, and I thought I can also learn. So I applied for those. After applying, I started researching on these options. So it was after making the applications at Delhi University, I started looking at, the scope of these things, how, what all can I do once I am done studying. And it was then that I read a little bit about economics, and it seemed a lot like physics to me. This might be controversial for people, but to me, it seems very logical. It seems like everything, makes sense. Like even someone who hasn't studied economics still uses the concepts that we study. And beyond all the, technical things that we call the processes or call stuff, everything is very reasonable. That we have that idea of rationality, and people kind of in their day-to-day lives, they follow those things. And if you break down all the jargon, it's something that you can actually easily explain to someone through examples of their own life. And that was really appealing to me. That was very fascinating for me. So because of that, and because it seemed like it had good scope as well, people go on to do a lot of good work after studying economics. I took that leap of faith and studied economics for 3 years at Delhi University, and that was really fascinating. I think the teachers that we had there were some of them were really amazing, and that spark that kind of had developed even before I applied was really fueled there. And one of the things that has sustained me towards, going towards a PhD was uh, the, the lifestyle and the way of working that I saw with the teachers there, that, they come in, they teach for a few hours, which is nice to interact with, young people, and then they do their own work as well. They do their own research and stuff. So that was very fascinating, that you have a well-defined job and you also have something which you do because you like it. Uh, so, and to get to that, I thought that, the way to that was to do a master's, maybe do a PhD after that, and then get into that kind of a um, setup. So with that, I applied for a master's as well. I sat for placements just to kind of see how it works, but then I applied for master's, got through this Gokhale Institute in Pune, went there. And again, some of the people there were just so inspiring.
Mhm.
Like if I mention one name, there's this professor there, Apte sir. Apte sir, knows so much about so many things. Like this relationship between physics and economics that I felt was there. He was the embodiment of that, because
Ah,
right next to Gokhale, there is Ferguson College. He
yes.
teaches physics at Ferguson College. He's a PhD in economics. He teaches physics there just because he's taught himself that much.
Yeah. Wow.
And not just physics, he teaches maths and so many other things. And while I was there, so as a kid in a Muslim family, I was taught how to read and write Urdu. And he, at that time, while I was there, he was learning how to read Urdu. So he would sometimes call me and get me to explain some of the things to
Yeah.
him. And that approach to learning
Yeah.
was just so refreshing, that there's someone who knows so much and is still willing to learn, and willing to learn from anywhere, right?
Yes.
I was just a kid.
Yeah.
So
Of
if
course.
if he's willing to learn from me, that just was really inspiring.
Yeah.
And yeah, after Gokhale, I worked at HSBC for 2 years, and that just happened.
Yeah.
I again sat for placements just to see how things work, and HSBC was the first company which came, and I got through the whole process that they had. And I, even after getting the offer, I hadn't thought that I would take it. It was just that after my master's, I had applied for some MPhil courses. I had gotten through some of the places, but I felt that I can do better in terms of where I'm going and doing a PhD from. So I thought, rather than not doing anything, I would just, join HSBC and see how it goes. So I joined. I was there for 2 years, and while I was there, I was applying for other jobs, more research-oriented jobs. And I think one thing that, was, now looking back, it seems useful that I spent 5 years working. But one thing that I think that could have shortened that period was some guidance, because I was trying to figure things out, or I kind of had to figure things out on my own as to how applications work, what is required for these PhD programs abroad. Um, and even within India. So there was a lot of, uh, I wouldn't say misinformation, but there was a lot of different kinds of information.
Okay.
So it was a little difficult to sift through all of that and figure out what would be useful for me. So it took me a couple of attempts at things to figure out that this is what I'm doing wrong and this is what I'm doing right. So it was while I was at HSBC, I was applying for these research jobs because I figured out by then that you need some exposure to research for these applications as well. And that could either come from a degree like an MPhil or a proper research job as well. And funnily enough, I did not hear from anyone for a year. And after, it got to a point where within HSBC, I was looking for research related projects. And my manager there was really nice. He also had studied economics from Delhi University. He was very supportive of everything. So apart from the usual work that I was doing, he would try to come up with things that could be, more research oriented while remaining in that banking kind of an institution. Um, just to kind of support my application and just to make sure that if I was interested in it, he was trying to provide that to me. So that was very helpful. And suddenly I heard from JPAL about a project that I had applied to a year back. So I'd forgotten about it and they kind of reached out. And then everything just happened within 4 days.
But they pay you less than HSBC, right?
That they do, yes.
That they do, because they are not well private. The banks pay tons of money, right?
Yeah, that is true. That was a difficult conversation to have, with parents as well, because I'd already once disappointed everyone by not going for that, engineering route. And that was a conversation that had happened with family and extended family.
Yeah.
And now to explain that, oh, now I've got a job which normally engineers do, and I'm leaving that for lesser amount of money, and I'll be moving from Bangalore to, remote places in Rajasthan and Bihar and so on. So
Are you out
that
of
was
your
again,
mind? Are you
yeah.
out of your mind?
Yeah, I did hear that a fair bit, that this boy is lost. And but my parents were supportive, and I think they came around. So when I taken economics, it it wasn't immediately that they understood my decision, but when other people who they held in high regard started saying that, oh, this is a good idea and this is a growing field and this is something that, if he's taken this decision coming from where he comes from, there must be something good about him. So that felt nice to them,
But at
to
least your
hear that.
marks were good, right?
Yeah, definitely. Marks were fine.
That's what was saving you, actually.
Yeah.
That if you were taking something undesirable with poor marks,
Yeah,
you would have been finished, right? But you
that
were,
is true.
yeah, you were
That
getting,
is true. Yeah.
yeah, and they hired you because you had good marks. All these people, they hired you because you had,
Yeah, that is true. That did save me.
that saved you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
So
had
again,
said,
with
if you
this
had
as well,
said,
it
I'm
was,
going to do dancing and I'm going to earn low wages, I think
yeah.
you would have got no approval. Okay.
Yeah. No, that is true.
So tell us about this JPAL stuff in rural Rajasthan and Bihar.
So JPAL was really interesting. So they hired me as a senior research associate, and I think the work at HSBC was useful in that, because I was handling data at HSBC and they needed someone to work on the data that they were collecting. Um, so I think because of that experience, I managed to get into JPAL. And with the data experience that I already had at HSBC, with millions of consumers and millions of transactions, the data in social sciences was tiny compared to that.
Yeah, it's small.
So a very extensive, large-scale survey was 7,000 people. So it was fine for me, and I think that experience was really, really useful. So I was working with the professors who were at places like University of Chicago, LSE, Yale, and so on. And to get, the way it works is that we are implementing their project on the field. So they sometimes visit and look at how things are going, but we have weekly calls with them on which we update how things are going. We are involved in some of the decisions as well. So that whole interaction taught me a lot, and not just with the professors, but on the other end with the government and with the NGOs, where we would implement a research project in an area where people are least bothered about it. Their concerns, and rightly so, are about much more important things than this project that we are bringing in. Their day to day is involved with is about how, where food will come from, and we don't get electricity, or there's drought, and so on. And to pitch and to be able to do this kind of a project with them, managing the professors on one side and the government bureaucracy on the other side, and the people in the field, it was a very interesting experience to just be able to communicate with all of these different stakeholders as it was and obviously to work on data and analysis and how these projects are planned. And if you're going for a field research experiment in economics, what do you keep in mind? What can go wrong? Everything can go wrong, and we've seen that,
Yeah.
right? Even with very good planning, there would be something which you haven't anticipated at all. With governments changing, something just gets shut down after 2 years of work on it. So all of that was really exciting, and I moved around a fair bit. So I was in Rajasthan initially, then I went to Punjab for a bit, for a couple of months to scope for a new project there. Then I was moved to Bihar because someone was moving out, and that project was at a very critical implementation stage. Um, so I was based in Jaipur or Patiala or Patna, the bigger cities in these states, but there was a lot of travel to rural areas and all over the state, essentially. So that was very,
All this
it.
was in COVID. So how the
No. This was before COVID. So this
before
was 2017 to 2020. I was in.
this is
So
before COVID.
COVID, yeah, the lockdowns came right towards the end of my stint at JPAL.
Okay.
So there was a lot of travel, a lot of interaction with these people,
Yeah.
and apart from the guidance on the research project itself, uh, the PIs on my projects, the professors, also helped me with my applications. So the first time I applied, I was interested in political economy through some of the things that I can come to later. Um, but but the projects that I was working on at JPL were energy and environment related. So the first time I applied for PhDs after getting the job at JPAL, I pitched according to my interest, according to political economy. I made my application saying that I'm really interested in political economy. I want to explore this and that. And I did not get through anywhere. I
Okay.
applied to very few, I think 5 places, and I did not get through anywhere. And then I spoke to one of the senior professors who was involved with the projects. He's Michael Greenstone. He's at University of Chicago. And his inputs were really helpful. So he asked me to make the applications building on my strengths, and my strengths included my work on energy and environment and a field research experiment and so on. So I tried to then link energy and environment to political economy with the experiences that I had on field, with the things that I had seen on field, and how these two could be linked, and then made an application. And then I got through a few places, including at LSE, and LSE then made a lot of sense. But even then, getting, like, as I mentioned, that was the time when COVID happened, and I heard about my acceptance and the fact that this is working out and I'm leaving JPAL while I was in Delhi during a lockdown. So during the first lockdown itself, it was in the middle of that I got to know. So they still had these open days planned because they felt that this would be a 15-day thing and it would
Yeah.
end, and then
Yeah.
they'd fly us here. And
Yeah.
so all of that was in the works, but everything happened online. And then people started suggesting that I shouldn't take it this year. Maybe I should wait a year and then accept the offer, because just starting it out online might not be useful. But I'd waited really long for it. I'd been waiting to do a PhD and go into research of my own for a while. So I accepted the offer, and somehow things worked out that I was in London by the time the course started. Not everything was in person then. Some of the smaller classrooms were in person for a little bit, and then for the second term it was all online. But I think it helped me as well, because the first year of coursework was really, really intense, and I wasn't used to it at all. Being away from a classroom for 5 years to suddenly jump into this, if not for the facility to rewatch the lectures at slower pace and to take things at my own pace and to kind of take my time to rewatch stuff, to understand it well. If not for that, I wouldn't have cleared the first year. It was too much for me too suddenly. So I think that also was useful. Um, and yeah, beyond that, I've been working with some really good people here. The faculty, one of the most, um, you know, surprising thing about the people here, and I say surprising because in a way it's a pleasant surprise, because you expect that people who are such big names in their fields would be really busy and they wouldn't have time for you, and they don't, but they make time for you, and that is very motivating, that someone who's such a legend at their work is making time for you. So initially, so my supervisor here is Professor Tim Besley. Initially, I was reluctant to reach out to him because I thought, why would he agree to be my supervisor? I haven't done anything of note to, even have that conversation. But again, took that leap of faith and asked him, and it has been amazing.
Yeah.
He always makes sure to be available whenever I need, and if he feels that he isn't the right person to answer my query, he directs me to someone who can. So that has been amazing.
Okay.
So yeah, that's been my journey till here. And in terms of my interest, that also developed throughout this whole process. So over after till masters, I was always in hostels, mostly college hostels. So accommodation was provided, right? So there was, if you get a certain grade, you are assured the hostel room.
Yeah.
It was when I moved to Bangalore for my job at HSBC, there was the first glimpse of the real world in some sense.
Yeah.
So I had a friend who was also from Gokhale. He also got placed at HSBC, and we were looking for a house together. He had a beard, I didn't. We went to a broker. The broker went to showed us the flat, and then came out and then looked at my friend and said that the contract cannot be in your name. It will only be in mine. And it took us a second to realize that he thought that he was Hamza and I was Shwetank.
Yeah.
And then we corrected him, and we were like, no, if this is the condition, we're not taking this flat.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that bad in Bangalore. So the second house we saw was nice, and there was no condition, and we took it.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Jaipur and Patna and all of these other places, I had to look for houses, and everywhere, the fact that I was a Muslim, or I was a bachelor, or I was a boy, was a hindrance in me getting a house.
Yeah.
And people were increasingly more in your face about it, that won't give it to you because you're a Muslim, or because you're a boy, or because you're a bachelor, and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas earlier people were a little, they would try to hide it, be like, oh, I've already committed it to someone else, or something like that. So that was fascinating, and that also took me back to my days at Delhi University and so on, that there were these localities where people from a certain region or people from a certain background would go and live there, right? So everyone, most of the people who came from Northeast India live near the campus in Vijayanagar. And that got me thinking that maybe that's not by design. Maybe that's not where they want to live, but that's where they end up living because there are market forces at play which force them there.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing, that even though it's sad that this is happening, but it also shows a dynamic at play which is leading people to segregate. Right, so this presence of discrimination is causing that segregation, and because of that segregation, we'd also seen that we don't interact with the other group. Like I happen to interact with the people from Northeast because I used to play football and they play football, and that was the only platform where there was this interaction. Otherwise, they would keep to themselves. Other people would keep to themselves. So this segregation was also reinforcing the discrimination in some sense. So I wanted to study these kind of things, to study this dynamic. And while I was working at JPAL, there were a lot of these in rural India there are a lot of segregated villages, right? So
Yes,
people based on castes or religion live in different villages, or if not different villages, different parts of villages.
right.
So it's very ingrained there, and that affects the kind of services they get as well. So since I was working on energy and environment, and in Bihar it was primarily energy that I was working on, you could see the differences in the amount of the hours of electricity that certain villages get. And if, say, a transformer gets is blown or something, the amount of time it takes for that to be repaired is different for different villages.
Yeah,
And that shows, I mean, that has a lot of, you can imagine that there are a lot of feedback or subsequent effects of that as well, which maybe get missed in the analyses that we were doing, that this
yeah,
idea that the people in that area themselves, or the characteristics of those people in themselves, might have something to do with the kind of services they get. So that was what I was interested in, and that was what I wanted to explore in more detail. And that is kind of what I'm working on right now, and it is quite a challenge, both in terms of just figuring out all of these different mechanisms in which this could work. So discrimination based on religion might work differently from discrimination based on caste, and how that plays out in the urban setting is a different story altogether, because there are other things at play. Whatever your job is might also be a cause for discrimination. People are reluctant to give houses to lawyers.
obviously.
So yeah, that also adds another dimension of
Yeah,
heterogeneity to it. And that it's very interesting, very fascinating, and at the same time sad that this is happening. But I think that because it has, we have grown up knowing that India is a very diverse country, and there is unity in that diversity, and the presence of that diversity makes us who we are, and provides so many opportunities because of that. So I think that studying this is really important in that sense, that the potential that we have as a country could be utilized to a greater extent if we manage to address some of these inefficiencies, for the lack of a better word. And I think
by
that
the
would
way,
be
not for lack of a better word, that's the right word.
right.
Inefficiency is the right word. It's a distortion and an inefficiency. You had asked me, is this a suitable topic? I said, yeah, discrimination is a very suitable topic, and it should be studied and analyzed very clearly. And unfortunately, there's no law in India, I believe, which prohibits this discrimination.
Yeah, there isn't. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm currently working on. And so far, like, I'm just wrapping up my third year. There's technically 2 more years to go, possibly a third. Um, the deeper I go into this, the more it feels like a much bigger project than I thought initially that it would be. But I applied for a few grants as well, and thankfully one of them came through recently. It's a small grant to kind of explore things and maybe do a pilot. So my plan is to work on this, maybe beginning with Delhi and then expanding to some of the bigger cities in India, because that's where people rent houses a lot. And I'm focusing on the rental housing market because there's a lot more movement in that than permanent housing.
Is the right focus. I agree with you. The
Right.
rental market is the key market, right?
Yeah.
Because of course, purchase market is also. I mean, people say there's discrimination in the US in the purchase
Right.
market also. And this is what they call.
So it's there in India as well.
Yeah, they call it red. No, even the banks discriminate. It's called redlining.
Right. Yeah.
Loans are not given and so on. So there's discrimination even in the US in the housing purchase market.
Definitely. Yeah.
Much less in the rental market. but more in the
Right.
purchase market. The rental market tends to be in the big cities, in apartments, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody cares about that. But purchase, yes, they. But anyway, it's a great topic. I'm glad that you are doing it. How do you support yourself? Is LSE still giving you money, or you have to look for some?
Yeah. No, LSE is still giving me money. I'm on the scholarship, and yeah, I mean they've increased it slightly in recently because of inflation, etc. And there are a lot of other opportunities as well. If you grade a few more scripts, you get paid for that, and if you kind of teach over the summer school, so I do all of that. So there are opportunities to kind of enhance that stipend, but the stipend on its own is also just about enough. Yeah.
Okay, so we will catch up with you 1 year from now.
Hopefully, I will have more.
See what you
some
have to say,
results.
because we won't ask your journey at that point, but any preliminary approaches you have to even studying this, because it's very hard. I don't think there's much literature on this in India at all. And
yeah, that is true. Most of the things that are available on this are related to the US.
Yes, you won't find literature on this. So it's a pioneering effort, and it'll take quite a bit of work on your behalf, your professors and you, to come up with the rigorous analysis of this rental market. And maybe other people are not interested, but I will like to hear from you 1 year from now as to where you are. So we'll catch up with you then.
Definitely. Okay. Thanks a lot for.
Yeah, let's say bye to the viewers now. And I'll be back to the viewers. I'll be back with another young person or an expert. Hamza is now halfway between a young person and an expert. He's some of both. But next year, I think he'll be an expert, and we won't call him in the voice of the young series. We'll call him in the expert series. Okay.
Hopefully, I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah,
all right.
bye, everybody. Okay.
Bye.